Welcome, friends,
to the How-To Heretic.
I'm Uncle Mark.
I'm Uncle Dan.
and I am Uncle Doug.
And this is your user's guide to life on the outside.
That's right. Leaving religion is the first step into a larger, better world.
A boot. It can also be a scary world. Things work differently now.
Never fear. That's why we're here.
Oh, we're your audio uncles. And with help from good friends and experts in all sorts of fields.
We're going to share the stories and seek the knowledge to build a great life.
After all, you only get the one that we know of, so you better make the most of it.
Why not do that? Well, guys,
Hey!
Hello.
we are back-to-back episodes 157 times.
Yep.
Holy cow.
Can you believe that?
We've never missed a number.
We've never skipped a grade. That definitely true for the three of us. And here we are, sequentially at 157, and we'll talk about what 158 is in a second.
What?
But first, I am going to give us, because it's hurricane season, I'm going to give us the weather report.
Oh, that's very, very good.
Yeah.
And then, after that, I am going to talk about I'm going to paint a picture
Yeah.
for you all.
You're going to talk about what happens when you eventually run out of toner.
And then I'm going to bring it home by talking about everybody's favorite subject, a me.
Yeah, and a recycling program that we invented.
It's like I've gone horribly, horribly wrong.
No, I'm
good
perfectly right.
Lord.
She lived another day, Doug.
Hey, we should talk about an event that's coming up.
If you haven't heard, kids, if you haven't heard this around the water cooler and the playground
And the campfire.
and whatever, yeah, the forest fire and the evacuation shelter. Wait, we are next week. 158 is our 3-year podiversary.
Yep.
What?
And we are doing a Zoom meetup that is also a show that will be put on the airwaves, both on the Pod Blasters and on the YouTubes.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Wait, we have a YouTube channel also?
Oh my God, we've got the
channel.
YouTubes, the Facebooks, the Second Life, the Cabbage Patch Kids. I don't know.
The MySpace, the whatever.
We got all that. So yeah, if you want to join us next week, you can be part of the show. But you can come join. Send us an email with Zoom in the subject line, and the day before, so next Saturday, we will send out the Zoom invite. The day before we do it.
Yeah, we record on Sundays.
We record on Sunday. So we're going to do the show just like we do the show, and you can see how the sausage is made. So what
Skip
you want
church,
Yeah.
come and listen to the show.
Exactly. So we do it at 1 o'clock on Sundays. That's always when we do the show. And we thought, well, fuck it. Let's have people come peek behind the curtain at the great and ridiculous Oz. So we'll send you the invite. If you need to remain anonymous, that's kind of on you. So you can change your name and image on your Zoom profile. And you may be called on. There will be a game. So you may be called on. If you don't want your image or your voice or name or whatever to appear, take those precautions and maybe don't raise your hand for the game because, again, that will be broadcast.
Do remember that, like, images of penises and stuff, that's not clever. That's dumb.
Yeah,
that's not
just
funny.
Do a more interesting organ. What about a spleen?
Yeah, show us your gallbladder.
Let's have a look at your duodenum or your Golgi bodies. So anyway, that's kind of on you guys. It'll be fun. And we'll do the show just like we do the show, and you can see what a hot mess it is that Cody manages to stitch into some sort of Frankenstein for you to listen to every week.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that'll be happening. We also, don't forget, the aforementioned YouTube. We also have our friend Joe Waldhair, who is running an unofficial, slightly unaffiliated, fully unaffiliated Facebook page. It is community for you.
That's right.
So, and then one last quick thing. I've been
Oh, my
answering
God. Really? Come on.
a lot of emails. If you have not received, if you wrote me and you have not gotten an email back, check your spam your folder, because I think a lot of it's going there. I don't know why. Probably because I am spam. Anyway, with that, let's do a show.
Hey, Uncle Doug. Have you ever looked up at the sky and thought, look, it's raining, or maybe, it's hurricane force winds in Salt Lake City. Maybe I should ward it off with magic?
I think probably everyone on the West Coast is thinking exactly that right now.
Right. Or summon it with magic.
Or
Right.
on the East or Eastern or Gulf Coast.
Yes.
Right. And when you can't, though,
Yeah.
I mean, maybe there's a question of, like, whose magic is actually making all this shit go? Is what I want to know.
Yeah,
Because,
how does it all work?
Salt Lake City lost a shit ton of trees. California, Oregon, they're currently all burned down. Like, who's making this shit happen?
There are more storms forming in the Atlantic than at any time in history, like the big storms. So that's good too. But
That we know about.
that we know about. Thank you. We weren't around for all 6,000 years. You know what I
Right.
mean?
See?
So listen, before we get to today's weather report, I wonder if you boys were fans of the amazing and all too short-lived American television comedy Arrested Development.
Never heard
I
of it.
literally watched 2 episodes of that last night.
Well,
I was in a Scotch haze trying to not think about the Supreme Court, so I watched the rest of Development.
do you recall the introduction of the matriarch of the preposterously dysfunctional Bluth clan, Lucille, in episode 1, where she marched down the stairs on a party boat and stomped up to her son Michael and declared, "Michael, look what they've done to me. Look what the homosexuals have done to me." And he responded, "Can't you just comb that out and reset it?" A brilliant line made funnier by the fact that she wasn't actually whining about her coiffure, but rather that a boatload of gay protesters were disrupting her husband's aquatic retirement party. Pure genius. When I watched that episode, I'm like, I'm in. Whatever this show is, I'm in. But when it comes to we homosexuals and looking at what we've done, America has its...
For a second, I thought you were saying we homosexual, like WEE. I was imagining very small little gays, but okay.
Tiny little
You
homosexuals.
mean inclusive homosexuals, meaning including you.
I didn't mean twinks specifically. I meant we, the collective, the imperial homosexuals. And looking at what we've done, America has its own dysfunctional, overly entitled, and very ethically challenged old matriarch with a regrettable hairdo who is furious at the queers. And his name is Pat Robertson. Yes, a character too ridiculous even for the writers of Arrested Development to attempt to have Gene Parmesan credibly imitate. And it's funny that I'm doing this segment, Dan, because you are kind of the resident Pat Robertson expert, but...
Yeah, well, on Thank God I'm Atheist, I have played innumerable clips of that man saying the most ridiculous shit known to mankind.
Yeah, so I'm going to plow your field for a little while on this one.
You should be grateful for him. You know what I mean?
I am.
It makes your life a lot easier.
Oh,
Yeah.
we're going to be very grateful for him at the end of this segment. So,
I love that guy. He is fucking nuts, and I love every minute of it.
he's crazy as a shithouse rat. So, what does all this have to do with the price of white rice? You're no doubt asking, Uncle Mark. Well, everything, you see. For those not familiar with Robertson, pardon me, he's an immortal white trash hobgoblin from the Phantom Zone who came to fame during the heady days of ridiculous blow-dried televangelism in the 1980s, where weeping men in robin's egg blue suits and women twacked out on Ativan and wearing as many as 16 wigs at once proclaimed Jesus to be king from tackily decorated Louis Kablooey-style gold-plated TV studios over weak UHF broadcast channels, and yet somehow raked in hundreds of millions of dollars almost overnight from credulous Christians because there was literally nothing else on TV. Robertson was just one sweaty witnessing face among this sea of utterly criminal evangelicals. There was Oral Roberts, Jim and Tammy Faye Baker, of course, Jimmy Swaggart, Robert Tilton, Peter Popoff, Jerry Falwell, and Paul and Jan Crouch, just to name a few. She of 16 wigs at once. More than a couple of the aforementioned TV miracle sellers went to jail, and the few that didn't very much should have, as you guys know. If you're too young to remember this truly awful moment in American television, just go to YouTube and search for any one of these goobers. You will not believe not only how clearly disingenuous and ridiculous they are, but how fucking vulgar and tacky the aesthetic was. If nothing else has made you a confirmed atheist at this point, the hair and makeup and the set design for sure will. So somehow Pat Robertson threaded this needle of high-dollar broadcast criminality and remains free. He has also somehow avoided the Reaper's scythe, still spewing his hate and hooey at the age of 90. This despite many years of fleecing his flock and very credible allegations that he is guilty of involvement in a massive fraud scheme and crimes against humanity, with his semi-secret interest in the blood diamond trade and chummy relationship with some of the perpetrators of the Rwandan genocide. There's a documentary called Mission Congo, if you want to get into that cheerful story. So aside from being a holier-than-thou human hemorrhoid and a diabolically grifting shitbag, he is also somewhat of an amateur meteorologist, you guys. That's right, kids. Pat loves him some severe weather events. But his particular talent is deciding the actual cause of meteorological events, and that, like with Lucille Bluth, can be blamed on the gays, and, of course, also abortion, among other things. So, in 2018, Hurricane Florence, which Robertson blamed on general American sinfulness and turning away from God, was headed to the East Coast. He commanded it to, quote, cease its forward motion and go harmlessly into the Atlantic, up north and away from the land, and veer off in the name of Jesus, because he feared it would damage his studio and, quote, university in coastal Virginia.
Yeah.
He felt empowered to do this because he claimed he was successfully able to change the course of Hurricane Esther in 1961 and Hurricane Gloria in 1985. In fact, he said, apparently in all seriousness, that it was his godlike ability to bend these massive cyclonic storms, some of which have the potential to release as much energy as 10,000 nuclear bombs,
Sure.
that convinced him he should run for and be guaranteed by God the presidency of the United States, saying a little confusingly, if I couldn't move a hurricane, I could hardly move a nation.
All right.
Is that a double negative or a half double negative with a twist or a inverted Lindy? I know what I'm talking about. Well, about that mighty power and Robertson's presidential ambitions. Despite claiming to have diverted 3 prior hurricanes, he failed to protect Virginia from the wrath of both Hurricane Bonnie in 1998 and Isabel in 2003, despite his commands. And as for God installing him in the Oval Office, his presidential run in the 1988 Republican primary netted him a total of 9% of the delegates, behind George H.W. Bush's 68%, and Bob Dole, whose singular contribution to the American political landscape was to maniacally refer to himself in the third person, with 19% of the delegates. So despite what's that?
9% is alarmingly high. For
Yeah,
Pat
it's
Robertson.
that's still like no small shakes considering what a dingus he is.
Yeah, and he actually finished ahead of Jack Kemp, who was a pretty well established Republican figure. So
I cannot believe that the Republican Party would back such a crazy nut job.
Yeah, it seems almost impossible. Them being so
unhinged.
So wise-minded.
Yeah, they're all about the institution. So anyway, despite his status as Earth's mightiest hurricane bender, we were denied a Robertson presidency, which maybe doesn't seem so bad these days. But it isn't just redirecting oceanic cyclones that connects Pat to this planet's mighty climate and natural forces. He also acts as sort of an early warning system as well, because he alone knows the will of God and God's very imprecise methods of climatic revenging. In 1998, he warned that if Disney World kept hosting Gay Days, an annual event allowing people to be publicly gay while riding a roller coaster, that God would send hurricanes and a hellfire of lightning bolts to destroy Florida. Well, I don't know about the lightning bolts, but the good Lord does seem to delight in trying to hurricane Florida off the map.
I was going to say, how could you tell if he destroyed Florida?
Also,
sorry, Florida.
You don't really get points for predicting like bad things happening in Florida.
You get
exactly 0 points.
That's the center square on the bingo card. You get nothing.
That's the state motto. Bad things happen in Florida. Sorry, Florida.
So yeah, God keeps trying to wipe it off the map, and yet Gay Days are still held the first week of October every year, as they have every year since Pat warned them to stop 22 years ago. Well, except maybe not for this year. And why is that? You see, it's not just weather that Pat can control and see the divine causations of. It's all sorts of other natural forces. Here he is, getting to the bottom of our invisible little visitor from Wuhan. Here's a question from someone writing into his show, The 700 Club, recently. Pat, last week you were talking about COVID-19. You quoted Chronicles 7:14. How can God heal our land and forgive the sins when abortion and same-sex marriage laws and many people are anti-Israel?
Wait, is that what the scripture says?
I guess.
Yeah, it's very clear.
Doesn't this prevent his healing and forgiveness? And Pat Roberston replied, I think you put your finger on something very important. The Bible says they turned from their wicked ways. They didn't get forgiven. They will turn from their wicked ways, and part of what we've done is turn. And we are not turning when we have done terrible things. We have broken the covenant that God made with mankind. We have violated the covenant. So to translate that, our grandparents are dying alone in hospitals hooked up to ventilators because of a combination of American distaste for right-wing Israeli policies, women's reproductive health, and marriage equality. I mean, it almost makes too much sense if you ask me. It's like, but also, what a kind and loving God, an awesome God, if you will. We could go on all day with Patrick, but let's just round out some of his other prophetic hits.
Point of order. His name is not actually Patrick.
It's not.
No, his name's Gordon, I think.
So he's a liar.
Look, if you get to pick your own nickname, why not go with Pat?
Pat. Yeah, maybe God's punishing him for lying about his name. So, in 1998, he insisted that merely accepting gay people could cause hurricanes, earthquakes, tornadoes, and naturally a meteor. In 2018, he screeched that banning discrimination against LGBTQ people would very likely result in, quote, atomic war. That logics out pretty neatly.
We're just talking about non-discrimination laws. We're not even talking about marriage here.
Yeah, just non-discrimination laws, like housing and employment and stuff like that.
That's heavy duty to go nuclear over.
Yeah, I'm not sure who's going to nuke us because of that, but it's 2020. I'm not ruling anything out. After the horrendous attacks of September 11th, 2001, carried out by religious fanatics of a different flavor, but a very similar worldview to Pat, he joined with the odious and thankfully now dead Jerry Falwell Sr., yes, there used to be two of them, to place the blame for God engineering the attacks on, quote, pagans, abortionists, gays, lesbians, and the American Civil Liberties Union. Yeah. And
it's fair.
God.
It's fair.
Yeah, again, it's just like, how did I not see this web that connects all these things, right?
Yeah.
And Pat is far from alone in his meteorological monkey business. He has plenty of good religious company as well. As Hurricane Sandy bore down on the East Coast in 2012, quote, biblical scholar John McTernan insisted God was whipping it up as a huge bucket of vomit in America's face during the election, forcing us to choose between, and this is brilliant, quote, a pro-homosexual Mormon along with a pro-abortion homosexual Muslim Brotherhood promoter, hard left fascist. Yeah, Mitt Romney was so pro-LGBTQ.
Yeah.
And if you know anything about the Muslim Brotherhood, saying Obama supported both them and gay rights is, well, insane. They are literally mutually exclusive. And while Pat insisted Hurricane Katrina was punishment for the sin of abortion, his fellow cornpone and snake oil slobberer John Hagee insisted it was because, quote, God caused Hurricane Katrina to wipe out New Orleans because it had a gay pride parade the week before and was filled with sexual sin. Okay. Every day is gay pride in New Orleans. I don't know how to tell him that.
Well, and why can't God send the fucking hurricane during the parade?
Right?
Right? Like, everybody's gone home now.
Yeah, I think we'll establish that his timing and aim are a little bit off. For a man that people expect to hit them directly with a lightning bolt.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for the ladies, in 2011, someone called Cindy Jacobs of something called the Generals International Ministry in Texas, in reference to the tsunami that rocked Japan and killed 16,000 people and caused the biggest nuclear disaster since Chernobyl, said that it was the result of the U.S. striking down Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Quote, quote, opening up our military to open homosexuality, and then quoting the book of Josiah, when we break God's law, it actually causes cycles of nature to come afterwards, which is not in Josiah. It's like we disrupted the laws of God. If this is true, what we will see is natural disasters. We'll see weather patterns going crazy. We'll see major storms. We'll see flooding and so forth. And this has happened. Everything we see has happened. To translate from her native language of tongues, an HR policy change in who can serve in our all-volunteer military made God so angry, he fucked up an entirely different country over 5,000 miles away. How could I have been so blind and not have seen it? It's amazing. Unless we think it's just lovers of Christ who blame, nay, plead for God to destroy whole cities because Adam and Steve moved into the neighborhood, Jews, or one Jew anyway, can be awful too, you guys. After the calamitous Haitian earthquake that killed over 300,000 people in 2011, many splendored asshole and Rabbi Yehuda Levin declared, "We have seen the underground earthquake, tsunami, Katrina, and now Haiti. All this is in sync with a 2,000-year-old teaching in the Talmud that the practice of homosexuality is a spiritual cause of earthquakes." He later wrote, "We plead with saner heads in Congress and the Pentagon to stop sodomization of our military and our society. Enough is enough." Again, gay people were allowed to serve openly in the American military, so a loving God decided to flatten one of our most impoverished and long-suffering neighbors who had exactly nothing to do with the decision. Mysterious ways. So there are 100 more examples of this bullshit, but you get the picture.
Well, and I for one, I'm not pro-military sodomy. I don't quite understand what that is.
Speak for yourself.
I'm not anti.
Not anti. I just don't know that as a policy we should have one going either direction on sodomy.
I think in the military they call that a flanking maneuver. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's where the term rear admiral came from.
I think it's also called a rear guard action.
We're so woke. Now we know why people with Bronze Age thinking look to Bronze Age explanations for frightening and destructive natural phenomenon. The only book they've ever read, and usually not all of it, is sort of a hysterical farmer's almanac of natural disasters and who exactly is to blame for them.
Right.
Just look at the flood most Christians literally believe covered the entire surface of the earth for the very specific sin of general global wickedness. But in addition to that, every storm, flood, earthquake, tornado, and swarm of locusts in the Bible was directly attributed to some specific sin or group sin, angering a preening alcoholic father of a god who was perfectly capable of just saying shit to people, but acted out very meteorologically when he was in some kind of snit. Yeah. But we are not a Bronze Age people, and humanity has had a seriously fucking tenacious fight, mostly against violent proponents of Bronze Age thinking, to gain a gigantic body of factual knowledge ever since Jesus hit print on his amazing holy book. And we know factually that hurricanes are intense low-pressure systems that form over the ocean in late summer and early fall and get blown towards us via warm westerly trade winds. The magical worldview of the Bible conditions one to develop teleological thinking. Basically, the old everything happens for a reason thing, right?
Right.
And that reason usually being a moody old queen called God. Arguing that hurricanes are a result of pride weekends at Disney World or personnel policies of the U.S. military sure is fun, but there really isn't any peer-reviewed science to back it up. Well, there is kind of one thing. In 2016, Skeptic magazine published an actual scientific study conducted by Robert Warren and a guy named MJ with the most unpronounceable name ever, Olenjinjak, and they compiled hurricane data from between 1960 and 2012 for 18 U.S. states that frequently are the targets of God's windy wrath. They then compared data from each state's vote tallies in presidential elections over the same time span and political data on the passage of or banning of gay marriage in each state as well. They put the numbers in big old brain machine and reached this startling conclusion. This is hilarious, and I quote them. Our results suggest no divine punishment for voting Democrat or approving gay marriage. Either God has long-standing wrath against the southern U.S. states, or they just happen to fall in the path of hurricanes. Our results not only illustrate the fallacy in a faith-based explanation for weather events, but also the problem of a faith-based approach to statistical analysis. Taken at face value, the data simply imply a statistically significant pattern of divine retribution against Republicans and the banning of gay marriage. Great doubt should be placed upon results that lack a plausible causal mechanism, regardless of statistical significance. So what they're saying is the data, if one sees the hand of the divine behind natural disasters, actually proves the exact opposite of what Robertson and his co-bigots declare.
Right.
Basically, God hates red states. And as people who live in a red state, we can kind of attest to that. But, of course, while that feels true, it isn't, because God does not exist. The regional, politically conservative leanings of these former states of the Confederacy just happen to lie in the climatological path of hurricanes. So now to conclude, a weather-based call to action of sorts, maybe. At 90 and a half years young, Pat Robertson's sweet chariot is going to swing low at any moment. and I have a fun suggestion to honor him at his impending service. Because hurricanes are not gay, or if they are technically lesbians, as they have female names, nor do they hate gays. So I want to send Pat out in a sexy gush of truly sexualized in a truly sexualized meteorological event, that being the Weather Girls chart-topping 1982 dance hit, It's Raining Men.
It's my favorite song!
Don't you guys think his funeral would be smartened up by a huge sound system on a flatbed truck with a few hundred hot, shirtless gay boys grinding it out to this upbeat ode to a hurricane of male energy? So, quoting the Weather Girls and the song's co-writer, Paul Schaefer, that's true.
Oh, my God, that's great.
Yeah, of course he co-wrote this song. And I quote, "'Cause tonight for the first time, just about 10:30, for the first time in history, it's gonna start raining men. Start raining men. It's raining men. Hallelujah, it's raining men. Amen. I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna let myself get absolutely soaking wet.
Soaking wet.
So there you go, guys. If you believe and actually really want natural disasters to kill thousands of people because you don't like the gays, you're a fucking idiot like Pat. So don't be like Pat.
Don't be like Marion Gordon Pat Robertson.
He is Marion, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I looked
Marion.
him up.
Yeah. Yeah, I think those are words to live by.
Yeah.
Don't be like Pat.
And by the way, if you need another thing to pick you up these days, I listened to that song again yesterday. It's so fucking great.
Oh, it's one of the great songs. You know what? We should buy the rights to it and just play it all the time on our show.
Yeah, totally. It's so much fun. I really, really love it. So
if you want to, you can go to our website. You can go to howtoheretic.com and click on the Support Us tab and go and do a one-time donation on PayPal. And in the notes, just put, this is to buy the rights for It's Raining Men.
How much would it cost? How much would that kind of thing cost?
I don't know.
I know.
We're going to look it up, but go give us money and we'll buy the rights to It's Raining Men and we'll just play it at the end of every show and it'll just be a pick-me-up because we all need it.
Hallelujah.
All right, well, let's move on.
Uncle Mark.
Oh, hi.
I think it's well known to our listeners that I think Val Kilmer is a highly underrated actor. If I've said it once.
I see where you're going.
You've said it way more than once. I'm surprised that you love Pretty Woman as much as you do because he's not in it.
But I think his career and hit its height in the 1997 spy flick Saint.
The Saint.
The Saint.
I don't know if it was 1997. I made it up because I don't care. I just needed to find a way to say the word Saint to toss to Uncle Dan.
It was him and Elizabeth Shue, as I recall.
And it was terrible.
Oh, it was so dumb.
So bad.
Yeah. It's actually worth watching. It's so bad.
Yeah.
It can't be fun.
Yeah. So anyway.
Okay. Yes, I'm going to be talking about a saint. But actually, uncles.
I was going to say, how'd we set you up there, Dan? That worked out good.
Great. It's fantastic. I'm going to spike it.
Okay.
Like Val Kilmer in Top Gun.
Yes! Exactly.
The Iceman!
You did it. You did it. All right. Full circle. I can stop now, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Done.
Now, actually, I will say this. This is the story of a painting, eventually. A magic painting, to be exact. And while I haven't seen this particular painting in person, I've seen a painting of that painting and had no idea what I was looking at. We'll get to it. I was tipped off to this topic, by the way, by someone in the Unofficial Heretic Hangout on the Facebook page, the Facebook group that is not directly affiliated, but is an awesome little fans only sort of group.
Yes, thanks to Joe Waldhair for helming that project. Always.
Yep. So somebody posted about this, and so all of you listeners should run out and join. Hi, Gino. Anyway, for posting this. Anyway, the painting was titled San Domenico in Soriano, or Saint Dominic in Soriano, which is interesting because while St. Dominic is one of the few saints we've ever talked about on this show that we actually have some reliable information on, as opposed to the obviously made-up stories of a person that may well have never existed at all, there's no evidence that St. Dominic ever went to Soriano, but we'll get to that too. First, I want to tell you a little bit about St. Dominic himself, or Santo Domingo, the man so important that the Spanish named their Sunday after him. That's not true. Dominic is a big dog in the Catholic world. During his life, he turned down the opportunity to become a bishop, instead founding the Ordo Praedicatorum, or the Order of the Preachers, which is known to this day by their nickname, the Dominicans. Dominic founded his order around the same time as the dude that he knew, Francis of Assisi, founded his Franciscan order. So there you go. They were all buddy-buddy there.
Like keeping up with the Joneses if you were like a monk. You had to start your own thing, yeah.
Okay, so Dominic lived in the late 12th and early 13th centuries. Born in Spain in 1170, there's a famous and obviously false story of his blessed mother. In this case, she was actually beatified by the Pope later. Having a vision. She had a vision of a dog leaping from her womb with a torch in his mouth, setting the world on fire.
That is called a nightmare.
Yeah.
That is not a vision.
That is classically called a nightmare or a serious gynecological condition.
Correct.
That you need treatment for.
The story actually probably came from a pun people used to make about the Latin nickname for the Dominican order, Dominicanus, which sounds a little bit like Dominicanis, which means God's dogs. Isn't that great? So clever.
Latin humor of that period really is
They just
not
they
good.
Knew what they were doing with the wordplay.
Yeah.
I will say that.
It grows on you. It grows on you.
Yeah, you'll like it later. Don't worry. There's also a strange tradition about his mom seeing a moon on his forehead when he was a baby. Or maybe it was a star, or maybe his godmother saw the star and his mother saw the moon. Anyway, that's all stupid, but now he's the patron saint of astronomy. Dominic wasn't
I like how the way we give our saints is literally exactly the same as how the Catholics give theirs.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Just pull it out your butt. Yep, there you go.
Yeah, I mean, we're following in the, we're standing on the shoulders of giants here.
Yes,
people.
we're walking in some fancy velvet slippers.
That's how we do. So Dominic, as a young monk, wasn't too big of a deal until his 30s, when he accompanied the Bishop of Osman from Spain to Denmark to go get a princess for Prince Ferdinand to marry. They were successful in that they made the deal to secure the princess. You know, princesses are expensive, but
it's a block of cheese.
But it's not out of reach. You can get one. But unfortunately, they were unsuccessful in that the princess died before they left to go back to Spain.
Did they get their money back?
I think they probably did.
That's good. You got to keep the receipt.
Always do.
Yeah, the original version of the parrot sketch.
Right, exactly. Hello, Polly!
Good news, we have your princess. What's the bad news? Well,
This princess has ceased to be. Anyway, as big a bummer as that was, this left Dominic and his bishop buddy with some time to travel. So they ended up at one point in southern France, where there was some funny business brewing. A group called the Albigenses, or Albigensians, or sometimes the Cathars, had been stirring up trouble for the church. They were ascetics and were gaining a lot of popularity by preaching about how decadent the church was getting. All the bishops and priests and monks had started getting into that lavish lifestyle. You know, they wore their designer robes and tall, sexy hats and lived in great mansions decked out in gold. They were straight pimping, is what was happening.
Yeah.
And the Albigenses, on the other hand, lived lives of pretty extreme self-denial and insisted that the Bible backed their way of life more than the Osteen-esque way of the bishops.
They were right.
They were correct.
Yes.
I may have to do a segment on those guys at some point because they're fascinating characters. Anyway, Dominic preached against these heretics and had debates with them, but had very little luck bringing people back into the fold. He realized that part of the reason for that might be that, they were kind of right. So the church, being rich as fuck, it was kind of a bad look. That's when Dominic had a brilliant idea. Why don't we get us some of that reform? So, like so many behemoth companies who see a trend happening in the inner cities and try to convince everybody that they were totally like that too, Dominic decided to try the ascetic thing himself. He took a vow of poverty and learned to rap battle. Well, at least to preach better anyway. Now, was this method effective against the heretics? Was he able to win over the Albigenses and win them back to the church? Yeah, of course not. But it did impress quite a few of the newly established middle class in the cities of southern Europe. So, in December of 1216, Pope Honorius III approved the Dominican order, and the rest is history. I guess the first part is history, too. Whatever.
It's all history.
It's all history. Anyway, that's the broad strokes of St. Dominic. He didn't do any great miracles or make any super magic things happen when he was alive. He wasn't that kind of a saint. Again, he was real, so...
Yeah.
But saints' stories don't end when they die. That's just the beginning, baby. Magic can still happen. Fast forward to the year 1530 at a little Dominican monastery in the southest part of Italy. The sacristan, who's the caretaker of the church, had gotten up at 3:30 in the morning to light the lamps of the church because monks ain't got shit to do, apparently. Suddenly, 3 ladies walk in and are all like, excuse me, do you know how to get to the Piranha Club from here? And the sacristan was all, no, of course not. Isn't that a gay club? Not that I'd know. I'm a priest. Why, is it underwear night? I'm asking for a friend. And then one of the women was all, wait, is this like a church? What church is this? And the priest said, this is the Church of St. Dominic. And one of the women was like, why is it so yuck in here? You guys are seriously, you need to hire a decorator. And the sacristan was like, well, that's not really our thing. And one of the women was like, wait, did you say St. Dominic? Oh my God, you guys, this is so weird. I totally have a painting of him in my purse for no reason. Do you guys want it? It's like way better than the skanky one you have hanging up there. You should put it right there behind the altar so everyone can see it and won't have to look at this rest of this garbage church. And boom!
I love that it's a Neapolitan Karen that you're describing.
Yeah. Suddenly, she bestowed on them a beautiful portrait of St. Dominic, and the 3 women stumbled out into the night, never to be heard from again. Well, until they appeared to the next people. It turns out those 3 women were Mary, the mother of Jesus, Mary Magdalene, and St. Catherine the Virgin. So, that was neat, I guess, but the best was yet to come, because that painting was magic! Like, super crazy magic. Like, eat your heart out, Chris Angel magic.
Easy.
Whoa.
He's a patron.
Like the painting.
I know he loves the show, but when I tell you what's going on, even he will have to agree.
Is it like Chris, the painting in in Ghostbusters 2? Is that kind of the magic we're talking
yeah,
about?
it's
Vigo the Carpathian.
Vigo, yes. We are like the buzzing of flies to him. Anyway, so here's the thing. One of the great tricks that it could do is that apparently if you ever hung that painting anywhere other than where Mary told them to hang it, the ghost of Bobby Burke would show up in the middle of the night and put it right back where it was supposed to be. All told, though, now here's the thing. I looked and looked for a list of the miracles that this painting enacted and could not find it. But I found plenty of sources saying that in less than 80 years, this painting had racked up over 1,600 miracles.
Wow.
And those weren't just like stories of miracles told by randos. These were individually verified miracles adjudicated by priests.
So
That's one hard-working painting.
Yeah.
So
That's
painting,
a high-volume miracle painting.
yeah, exactly. And so this painting was so impressive that in 1644, Pope Innocent XII gave the painting its own feast day. Like, on the liturgical calendar with all the most important saints' days, a painting of a saint was given saint status itself.
What's the feast day?
It was... Wait... okay. I know that St. Dominic's feast day was in August. The thing is, it's been supplanted. They in the early 1900s, they switched it out and gave that feast day to a saint who had a movable feast, which is
Bummer, because what I was like, I really wanted to do my magical painting cuisine.
right.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Where you eat nothing but burnt ochre and lapis
That's
lazuli.
it. And gesso.
Anyway, you'd think that a painting with that much power would be protected forever. But alas, in 1659, the Calabrian region was hit by an earthquake, and the Soriano Friary was badly damaged. Never fear! They rebuilt, which lasted until 1783, when God said, I was trying to destroy that, and put his foot down. He hit the area with a whole series of earthquakes, killing 171 people, and wrecking pretty much all of Soriano. Wow. Not knowing when to give up, however, they rebuilt the church again. But apparently they didn't do it right because the painting didn't show up behind the altar. Now, all over Europe, you can find plenty of paintings of St. Dominic. Look for him to be holding lilies and or a book and maybe, I'm not kidding, a dog holding a torch. I actually saw a lovely portrait of St. Dominic by El Greco in Toledo, Spain. Who painted Dominic all the time. Huh. Interestingly, El Greco himself was also named Dominic, but the Greek version, which was Domenicos. Anyway, that's
a coincidence too explosive to ignore.
Well, I can't even get into it. I don't have the time to explore all of that. But you can also, all over Europe, find quite a few paintings of the painting of St. Dominic, which I think is way weirder and far more interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of miracles by the transitive property, like how. Yeah.
Well, I mean, the painting did a lot more heavy lifting, miracle-wise, than Dominic ever did.
Can the paintings of the painting of St. Dominic perform minor miracles? What I'm asking is can they, like, change the thermostat?
Yeah, or you reach into your pocket and your pencil is magically sharpened.
Or if I'm a tourist and I take a picture of the painting,
of St. Dominic,
will it help me find my car keys? I mean,
I think it will.
Right.
I can't see how it could be avoided.
How many generations removed from the original painting before it's ineffective to treat sciatica?
That there was
I think
a
eventually
Catholic...
it gains power, doesn't it? If you do a painting of the painting of the painting, you could probably walk on water at that point.
You can rest assured,
tear a hole in time space.
You can rest assured that there was a Catholic meeting of priests to discuss this very issue.
Yeah. This is what the Pope thinks about when he's laying in bed. Let me see.
I don't know if that's what he thinks about, but fine.
Yeah.
Sure.
Topic for another time.
That and underwear day at the Piranha Club.
Yes.
All on his mind. Well, there you go. That's it. St. Dominic and his famous painting that we can't see. But we can see paintings of it.
Well, that's a crazy story. And can I just say one thing that
Please do.
To bookend this segment. I looked it up, and The Saint did come out in 1997.
Oh, you
Whoa.
did it!
It's a miracle. The painting does another one.
Just talking about a picture of a painting, of a drawing, of a painting, of a saint is miraculous.
It is enough.
I am
True enough.
convinced. Hosanna! We'll do a Hosanna shout at the end of the show.
Somebody go out there and paint a painting of the painting of the painting, and then all will come. Good things will happen to you.
Yeah, I love it.
Gentlemen,
Yo.
uncles both, listen, I have the honor and privilege of telling you that people have given us money. People continue to give us money. I don't know why. There's no explanation for it. But
Well, let's not
out of the
jinx it.
generosity of their hearts and the guilt of their brains, they've decided that what we do is enough to to maybe kick in some kizash.
Yeah.
So we have some people to thank. So I want to start by thanking Eric and Andrew, and then Uncle Mark. I think you have some people to thank as well.
Yeah, so we have the new Patreon option, or the new Patreon, the new PayPal option on our website when you go there. So if you want to give us a one-timer, that's fine too. We got a nice donation from somebody who goes by Pet Care.
Lovely.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and also a very generous donation from someone called Janice. So thank you very much for that.
Indeed.
Yeah, if you would like to be a giver to us, which, obviously it's the cool thing to do,
Yeah.
go to howtoheretic.com and click on the Support Us tab. Also, there is another way to give, and that is to put a star on our forehead, or technically 5 stars, and then, write a review of us saying how great we are.
Yeah, put 5 stars on our 5 heads. And look, in this time of social distancing where we can't hug, 5 stars feel like a hug, you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
So give us a 5-star hug. Let's make it happen. Dreams really do come true. Let's move on. Uncle Dan,
Hey.
if you're like me, and you're like
And I
most
am.
people, you're very much like me. In fact, we're practically the same. You've probably, of an afternoon, found yourself down to IKEA.
Ugh.
Yeah, where first of all, it's going to be a controversial take, but I do like the meatballs. I'm going to say it.
Well,
What?
fine.
So good.
The secret ingredient is air.
Well, I like an airy meatball. You know me.
right.
Anyway,
Arian, Mark, Arian.
oh,
Well, it's both. It's both.
we got off track. So, but what I find is you make a purchase, you take it home, and if you don't use the little doohickey to tighten the proper thing the right way in the Flurgavenflieben, then you can end up with an unstable piece of furniture, right? And you can have a thing that looks sturdy and you thought was sturdy and maybe you paid too much for, but at the end of the day, it's just a fucking lie and it's going to collapse.
I got
Yeah.
news for you. Even if you use the Flurgenflaben correctly,
Yeah.
it's still going to fall apart.
It's going to fall apart, and it's all it's like particle board and lies, Doug. What do you have to say about that?
And it's IKEA, so you didn't pay too much for it. Don't worry.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, I would also like to talk about some flimsy furnishings, I suppose.
Yeah, it's the flimsy furnishing hour.
Well, dear uncles, like many of our listeners, and of course you too, I have been running out of things to do and watch during quarantine to keep my sanity. So after having found the far end of both Netflix and Pornhub, and after giving HBO Max a quick look before deciding that no one's that desperate, I have been doing a lot of introspection. You know what happens when you get to the end of Netflix? It's like Metroid. It just starts over. It's very frustrating.
Yeah, there's you don't win anything.
Yeah,
Nope.
It's a Mobius strip.
Yeah.
Although when you get to the end of Pornhub, a lot of things happen.
Yeah.
I'm not saying good things, but boy, do they happen.
Well, one of the things I've been thinking a lot about, mostly because I am 1/3 of an atheist podcast, is my journey out of religion. We all have our own version of that journey. No matter where we started, one way or another, each of us found our way out or managed to steer clear of repressive religious experiences. So today I thought I would reflect on the signposts that eventually helped me find my way into the light And for your sins, I thought I would bring you all along for the ride. So if you're not interested in some full-fledged navel-gazing, skip forward 20 minutes or so to spare yourself.
Yeah, well, you don't even need us here, do you?
No, please go.
Yeah, all right, bye.
For the dozen or so listeners still with us, let's talk about myself. Let's talk about my shelf, not just myself. The analogy of the shelf is...
The shelf of self.
That's right.
Yeah.
The analogy of the shelf is probably not unique to Mormonism, and I'm not even certain where it truly originated, but the idea is analogous to the straw that broke the camel's back, as I'll explain. In Mormon culture, it originates with an article in the soon-to-be-canceled Mormon magazine Ensign in 1975, where wife of the then prophet, Camilla Kimball, spun a metaphor for young Mormons on how to avoid having doubts overcome their faith. In the metaphor, when she read or heard things that bothered her about the church, she put them on a shelf in her mind and stopped thinking about them. From time to time.
It's turned it
Isn't
off.
that nice? Turn it off.
Literally, it's the precursor. Like, I don't know if those Book of Mormon boys knew how spot on they were hitting it, but yeah, I mean, if
It's crazy how spot on they hit it with that shit. It's
Yes,
just,
exactly.
It's amazing.
Just turn it off.
Yep.
So from time to time, she would look at the things on that shelf in her mind. Some were answered or resolved. Some were no longer important. And some needed to stay on the shelf a little while longer. It's not hard to see how problematic this metaphor is. In what will become a theme of this segment, nothing speaks clearer to the corruption at the heart of Mormonism and all religion than its constant injunction on not only reading and hearing negative information, but from even thinking about it.
yeah,
At some point, the ex-Mormon community began using this metaphor by running it to its logical conclusion. All of us who escaped from the cult heard, read, or thought things that troubled us about the church, and unconsciously we put those things on a shelf in the back of our mind. Finally, one day, the shelf can no longer take the strain, and it collapsed. It bears mentioning that the shelf oftentimes collapses of the aggregate weight. So many times the final straw may be minor or even seemingly meaningless, but it collapses the whole shelf nonetheless, a la the straw that broke the camel's back.
Yeah. Sure.
And once the shelf is broken, there is no putting Elder Dumpty back together again. So, in the process of in order to process the realization that you have been lied to by people you trusted for your entire life, many ex-Mormons, myself included, spend a lot of time, sometimes the rest of your life, examining every piece that you put up on that shelf before it collapsed. So today I would like to talk about a handful of those things from my life. Don't worry, I won't talk about all of them. I don't hate you all that much. So let's go back to the first one I can remember and work our way forward in time to the final one, shall we?
Yeah, it's shelf singular, Doug. It's not shelves. Yeah.
As you all know, all three of us were born into the Mormon faith, and try as I might, I can't remember anyone ever asking me if I wanted it. And so I underwent the indoctrination of having abhorrent and silly stories fed to my developing brain that would be scoffed at if they were told to an adult. Now, before we get going, Uncle Mark is going to feature prominently in this journey as he was either present or central to many of these memories.
Oh, jeez.
So lest any of you think that Uncle Mark is either kind, noble, or knowing, let me just put some context on the kind of person I was forced to grow up with. Across the street from our...
Moving on. Thanks, everybody. Good show.
so
Great show.
glad I'm not your real brother.
Let's wrap this up.
Across the street from our modest home, there was an elderly widow named Bee. She was kindly and sweet, although we did not know her well. She was always quick with a smile and a wave, yet being an elderly widow, she did not offer much by way of drama or adventure to our neighborhood. That was until one day. I was probably 8 or 9 years old, so Uncle Mark was in his early teens.
This is not an important story?
Ever vigilant.
Wait, Uncle Mark, I'm going to overrule you. This is very important. We got to hear it.
I was probably 13 or 14.
Yep, ever the vigilant neighbor, Uncle Mark spotted a suspicious car parked for some length of time in front of Bee's house.
Like, you have to understand, nothing fucking happened in our neighborhood. Ever. So, like, a mysterious car parking was like the Hindenburg crime. Something you paid attention to.
None of that will exonerate you. Concerned for her safety, lest some gang of violent criminals had taken her hostage in her own home, Mark did what any brave American would do. He told his 8-year-old brother to take his little red wagon to her house under the guise of a newspaper drive for his Boy Scout troop. For those of you under 40, A newspaper was something we all used to read to protect our democracy. A democracy is a form of representative government where the majority gets to pick its leaders. Anyway.
We don't have time, Doug. Move
Right.
on. We don't have time for all of this.
A newspaper drive, for those who don't know, was where Boy or Girl Scouts would go house to house in their neighborhood and collect the accumulated newspapers from their neighbors to take them to the recycler to raise what meager funds they could to afford Pinewood Derby cars because your uncles grew up in a Norman Rockwell painting. So off I went to do battle with the Sinaloa cartel while Mark watched bravely from behind the curtains in the front window. Now,
Somebody had to keep an eye. Somebody had to be the lookout.
imagine you're an aging widow. Your kids have gone. You're all alone. One of the only outlets you have to interact with the world is the several newspapers you get on a daily basis delivered to your home. You hadn't noticed how full your garage was getting with stacks and stacks of yellowing, dusty news until you could barely shut the garage door anymore. Your tired, gnarled hands could no longer tie string anymore, so the neat, orderly stacks had given way to teetering piles of loose paper.
Look, I'd never seen in her garage. I didn't realize she was a hoarder.
Then, like a miracle, a little tow-headed boy with a rickety red wagon appears at your door to solve all your problems. The shocked look on his face when you opened the door to the vault at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark was priceless. Surely it was the look of regatta boats and a nice new khaki cravat for his uniform, and not the look of catastrophic backfire. And so began the Herculean task of transporting 50 years of pulp history back and forth across the street, one wagon load at a time. Faithful to his calling, Uncle Mark bravely refused to abandon his post at the window, lest some other evil befall be, so he watched his little brother toil in the summer heat for the rest of the day.
I didn't want her to be set by highwaymen or brigands.
He also did not take the blame for the driveway full of unwanted and useless newspapers when our parents got home, and luckily B never noticed the suspiciously full garbage cans out front of our house for the next several months. So that's who our Uncle Mark is. Just bear that in mind.
Well, I was trying to overload your shelf.
Back to the actual story. The first time I ever felt that there was something wrong with the church that I was forced to attend every Sunday was during a fast and testimony meeting. We've said often on this show that fast and testimony meeting is like an open mic night in a comedy club for divorced men. Yeah. It's sad and it is lengthy. Anyone who wants,
there will be weeping.
That's right.
And you don't get to eat beforehand. So
yes.
You're hungry and you're confused and mad.
You're ignorant and ornery.
The world's worst comedy club. There's no drinking, no nachos.
And no comedy.
No comedy. Anyone who wanted to could get up and talk about pretty much whatever they want. And you guys remember this. It was a common practice for parents to have their very young children get up and bear their testimony. Mm-hmm. These parents would stand behind the children and whisper in their ear, and the children would repeat, I know that Joseph Smith was a prophet of God, and I know the Book of Mormon is true. If it sounds creepy, it was.
Yeah,
I believe I was a deacon at the time, so I was around 12 years old, and I watched this display one Sunday with a sense of deep unease, and I remember one word that popped into my head, Nazi. Now, I'm not trying to compare anyone with Nazis. It's just what popped into my head. I think that like all young boys, I was going through my World War II phase, and the only context I had for that kind of nefarious manipulation was the Nazis I saw in countless documentaries. So I am sure those parents loved their children and thought they were doing the righteous thing there, but it really bothered me. Not knowing what to do with that emotion, I put it on the shelf. Growing up at about 14, for reasons that would become clear, Uncle Mark had just about enough of the Mormon Church. So against tremendous and often violent pressure, Mark stopped going.
Yeah.
As I hit my early teens, having a brother under the same roof who was not a part of the cult was equal parts tragedy and opportunity. I was convinced that Uncle Mark was one story, one scripture, one earnest testimony from returning to the fold, and so I never missed an opportunity to read him scriptures, try out apologetics, and tell him how special the church was.
It was a great time. I loved it.
Looking back, I sometimes marvel at the patience it took to put up with me, but then I remember the newspapers, and I wish I had been even more annoying. One day in church...
We saved that woman's life. Mysterious car.
One day in church, we read the story of Ammon in the Book of Alma, the longest and by definition worst book in the Book of Mormon. The story is too stupid to spend much time on here, so here's the Reader's Digest version. Ammon, a white guy, and therefore righteous, went on a mission to the land of the darkies, who were therefore evil. He took a job tending the flocks of one of the kings of the land, and while doing so was set upon by a whole band of dark-skinned devils. Ammon not only fought off the Lamanite horde, but cut off so many of their arms they filled several bags, which were shown to the king, who in gratitude allowed Ammon to preach his gospel to them. Great story.
Yeah.
Mark and I and kind of all our friend circles, we were at the time reading the Dune books and playing D&D, so I was convinced that this hardcore action story would be just the thing. So I read it to Mark in my best baritone. To my surprise and disappointment, it had, let's say, a less than enthusiastic reaction. So,
Oh, Mark. Yeah. Come on, man.
Ditto the time that I've told this story before, so I won't dwell on it, but when I learned the apologetic in seminary about how no one could have made up all the names in the Book of Mormon. No one person. I took that, nice pointy apologetic to Mark, and he's like, okay, time me. Blomho, Blomhoha, Schlingdot.
I think I'd gotten to like 50 just, Yamahihu.
Yeah.
And you just walked out of the room.
I did. I was so
You
deflated.
should have chased him out. Bullshittum.
Yeah.
Clapdoor.
Yeah.
Chandok.
I figured these were such fucking silver bullets that when they just failed, it did make me believe maybe there wasn't all there was to this story. I better put that on the shelf.
Put it on the shelf. Shelf it.
As I entered my middle teens, I began taking more advanced classes in school, and one of them was physics, where we learned about the speed of light. The idea that there is a universal speed limit that all matter must obey was pretty mind-blowing. All the more so because there is a Mormon doctrine that states that God created and is subject to the laws of the universe, which would have to include the speed of light.
I was going to ask you if you were going to bring up this story.
This one definitely stuck in me because it's not that got me. It's the next thing that happened.
Yeah.
This sent my adolescent brain a-spinnin'. If God lives on or near a star Kolob, and the nearest star to us is Proxima Centauri, which is 4 light years away, any revelation or visitation by God would require him to send that revelation or his visiting angel at least 4 years in advance. Earlier still, the further Kolob is from us. Yeah. So that actually didn't cause me to doubt as much as me trying to wrap my head around how this system would work. I brought this up to a good friend of mine at the time, and after a few minutes of talking about it, he said, and I remember this, we shouldn't be talking about this.
You guys, you flew too close to the sun on that one.
Exactly, and that did cause doubt. Like, why should we not talk about this? What's the danger?
Yeah.
The answer, obvious to us now, but I still believed at the time, so I couldn't see it. So, plunk on the shelf.
Yeah.
I managed to keep my shelf intact long enough to end up on a Mormon mission in Honduras. I've described enough of my sufferings in previous episodes, and Uncle Mark was kind enough to remind us all of my, let's say, less than woke worldview in a letter from me he read in the patrons only section. Hashtag it's never too late to become a patron. I've also described that while on my mission, I was bothered by the fact that while ostensibly sent to serve our fellow humans, we did little to no actual service. I could not understand why the church would not avail itself of the tens of thousands of able-bodied young men and women to effect actual change in the world. Surely such service would do more than anything else to attract people to our message. Nope. Nobody up the chain was concerned, what you did to help a family or a community. It was, how many first discussions did you give? How many challenges did you give? How many books of Mormon did you leave behind a dumpster? That's all they cared about, and it bothered me.
Yeah,
on the shelf,
they just wanted points on the board.
There's points on the board, stats.
Yeah.
So threw that on the shelf. I didn't know it, but the shelf was starting to creak. When I got home, I moved in with a group of returned missionaries and started attending the University of Utah. It's hard to describe how socially maladjusted you are after serving a mission. So the only people you can kind of relate to are other ex-missionaries.
Yeah, it's kind of like guys coming home from Nam, right?
Yes.
They just hang out at the VFW because nobody else gets it.
Right.
Yeah.
So having been dumped on my mission, my prime directive was to find and marry a wife with all possible haste. To that end, unmarried Mormons in college attend what's called a singles ward. It's all the unmarried Mormons in their early 20s desperately trying to get married before they turn 24 and it's too late. If you've ever wondered what the desperate sound of settling for anything was, poke your head into a singles ward.
Oh.
And what's so crazy is you'd see, very good-looking men, very beautiful women, like they're in their, early mid-20s. They will marry anybody. They have got to get married. You know what I mean? Like, it's pretty sad. So I hated it, but I still went. So it was around this time that I began reading The Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. Talk about the strangest thing to finally collapse your shelf. I can't even remember if it was for a class or I was just reading it.
I was going to say, who let you read that book in that condition?
Well, I think I just was reading old science fiction. I can't even remember if it was for a class.
Huh.
But like I mentioned, you never know what's going to do it. If you haven't read the book, it's about a dystopian future where all humans are genetically engineered and their fates are predetermined. The rulers of the world are called the Alphas, and they adhere to a very bizarre religion that worships Henry Ford. One of the rituals of this religion is to work Alphas up into a frenzy with song and chant, calling upon Henry Ford to appear, culminating in an ecstatic orgy.
I forgot about the Henry Ford angle.
Yeah, remember that?
I don't know why I forgot that, yeah.
As the Alphas in this one scene begin to get spun up in their ritual, they begin to claim they can hear Ford coming down the hallway. He's right outside. I can hear him. The main character, Bernard, gets in on the action, and he's like, I can hear him too. He's right outside. Even though he couldn't hear him, and he knew he wasn't outside. He was just doing what he was supposed to do and what everyone expected him to do. I think Aldous Huxley was commenting on the dangers of technology, blind obedience to a system, and the evils of totalitarianism. I doubt he was writing his book to help one white kid in Salt Lake City escape from a cult, but there it was.
Well, then not a wasted effort on Huxley's part.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
For how long, I can't say, but for some time I had been utterly faking it. Going through the motions, saying what was expected of me, but deep down, I didn't believe any of it. This was pretty earth-shattering, especially because I had just spent 2 years selling this bullshit and paying for the privilege, by the way. So I decided to give it one more try.
Can I interrupt you really quick, Doug?
Yeah.
Ivana, one of our patrons, our dear friends, was asking about, like, when I did the segment on when I did the patrons only thing about how much our parents stole. She was asking if you paid for the mission yourself or if they did. I couldn't remember.
I paid for a large portion of it. I don't know if you remember that summer and some previous summer, I did a ton of lifeguarding and private swimming lessons, and that was I saved up all that money for my mission. I couldn't pay for all of it though, so.
But it was a lot of your money. Okay,
so
we cleared that up for her.
Well,
sorry
let me phrase it. It was all of my money, but it was not nearly enough to pay for the mission.
Right.
Yeah. So, I decided to give it one more try, and I asked to meet with my stake president, which for Nevermose is like a Catholic bishop, to express my doubts. It was not easy to bring this stuff up. It's really intimidating to go into that room and say that kind of thing. It's such almost expressing a weakness. So, I had this belief still at that time that the further up you went in the food chain in the Mormon hierarchy, the more you knew, the more answers you had,
the more keys to the kingdom you had.
Yeah, the more truth had been revealed to you.
And the more the more close you are to God. So God will tell you, like, he'll whisper in that stake president's ear more than the bishop's ear, but
right.
If you have to go all the way up to the top of the food chain, you probably should have.
Right. Well, I told this guy I was having serious doubts about pretty much the entire Mormon enterprise, and after listening with kind of a bored indifference, he told me to. Any guesses?
Put it out of your mind.
Put it on your shelf.
Go pray.
No, he said, go home and pray and read the scriptures.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Go shelf yourself.
That was the moment. Like Colonel Kurtz said in Apocalypse Now, and then I realized like I was shot with a diamond bullet right through my forehead. I realized he didn't know the answers because there were no answers. Yeah. It was fake. It was a lie. My shelf collapsed in the lobby of that goddamn church.
Wow.
Ironically, it reminded me of something else from Brave New World. Towards the end of the book, the main characters confront one of the 10 alphas who run the entire world and administer this global religion. And he admits to them that the religion is total bullshit. He knows it. The other 9 know it. But the system must go on. I wonder how many Mormons above a certain level in the hierarchy fully know that it's complete bunk. And they just keep on perpetuating it.
Once you get to a certain level, you kind of have to, don't you think?
I would think, especially like if you're an apostle and you know about the peepstone or the $100 billion. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, and also not for nothing, but like, God ain't talking to you. Like once you
Yeah.
get to a certain point, God's supposed to like be telling you shit.
Yeah,
And,
there's the combination of the sunk cost fallacy, and I think that, and I don't know what this is named exactly, but I think there comes a moment in some of those minds, Doug, where they go from believing it's true to needing it to be true, and they don't really realize that they've transitioned into kind of a space of doubt. Right? I guess that's just a greater extension of the sunk cost fallacy, because John DeLynn had probably his most fascinating interview he's ever done, is the Australian or English guy who went to get his second anointing.
Yeah.
And he was a pretty high-ranking Mormon in his community, right?
Yeah, he was a high 70s or something like that.
Yeah, so he was in the top, hundreds of the Mormon church. And he believed hook, fucking line, and sinker, and his shelf didn't break until the next morning when he walked into the temple and they said Jesus couldn't be here to meet you in person today. Because that's what they tell you is going to happen.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's some evidence that I think there's, obviously it's varied, but that's some evidence that there are people who are 100% in, even near the top.
Sure.
And I don't know, we'll never know how many upper echelon members of any faith are still true believers. The anecdotal evidence in the Catholic Church that the instances of atheism amongst priests is actually quite high.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's because you get to a point where it's like there is no answer, and the only explanation is there's no one to give it. There's no one up there. So, yeah, I mean, I went home that night and very carefully brought this up with my ex-missionary roommates because, again, expressing this kind of sentiment can be really dangerous. It turned out that all three of us were in pretty much the same place. We stayed up all night talking, and when the sun came up, we were all out.
Wow.
So it happens fast, at least it did for me. And then, I had to set about finding community and other people to talk to. I basically had to walk away from my social circles. And because I tried to go back to church a few more times out of habit, basically. You know what I mean? All my friends were there. Some of the girls I was interested in were there. And I felt like the last true human in that last scene in The Invasion of the Body Snatchers, where they're going to find out.
Yeah,
right?
just don't make eye contact, no sudden moves, just be cool.
But, I did find community, I did find friends, and what we're doing here is definitely trying to help build that community for people in similar circumstances. And then, to kind of round this out, I guess the point of all this is every religious person we know, and any of us know who is still fully invested in a religion has a shelf.
Yeah.
They all do. And many of them can make it through life without that shelf collapsing. But many of them can't. And you never really know if it's going to be just a little feather that finally is just too much for the shelf to take. And so if you can plant a seed, if you can give a doubt, if you can respond to an apologetic, it may not happen now, but boy, it's going to help.
Yeah,
interesting.
And like you were saying, Doug, you were still going through the motions for a while without fully realizing your shelf had collapsed.
Yeah.
So you may be, and it may be people in those circumstances that are really argumentative because they're just realizing that they're in free fall at this point, right? So
Right.
you just never know where somebody's journey is, but that's pretty interesting.
So
I just like the image of this podcast being a party that's dancing on the remains of broken shelves everywhere.
Let's have a shelf party.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's definitely what this proves is that if you teach your younger siblings the value of work by having them get 400 tons of newspaper from the weird lady's place across the street, then eventually you'll have a podcast.
Look, all I'm doing by telling that story, Mark, is baring my teeth. You think there's not more? You think the well isn't deep?
There's plenty more. Like the time that you were dancing in the living room when we were like 6 years old and our dad walked by and he just looked in the living room and you stopped and said, sorry. And he walked away.
Oh.
And he walked away and you looked at me and you said, I don't want him to think I'm gay.
Oh, shit.
Well, I was not wrong.
No, your instincts were correct. So, all right. Well, everybody, go put some pressure on everybody's shelves.
Yeah.
All right. Let's move on.
Well, friends, that is it for this week's show.
Hey, we'd love to hear from you. If a dog has come flying out of your uterus with a torch in its mouth, send us an email at howto@howtoheretic.com.
Or if you can direct me where to find a gay tornado, you can leave us a voicemail about it at 903-88-HOW-TO, which is 903-884-6986. I am also a gay hurricane on Twitter at howtoheretic.
And always thanks to our patrons, mostly because they've never made me carry 50 tons of newspaper.
And thank you so much to our original painting, Cody Layton, for editing the show.
And thanks to all of you, friends, for tuning in.
Bye-bye, friends.
Bye-bye.